you guys. Beautiful worship set this morning. We're going to continue this morning in the Passion. And we forgot to remind you during announcements this morning, make sure you're weather aware today. Some storms coming in this evening, and so not really all that pretty. So today and again on Wednesday. So make sure you pay attention to those things, and anything that ever occurs, always let us know if the church can help in anything that happens along those lines. This morning, as we continue in the Passion, this is the third message. Today's message is entitled "The Trials of Jesus," and it's a two-part message. There were 6 trials. I'll just be honest with you, I didn't realize there were 6. Until I counted them and really looked at them in Scripture. Sometimes they'll kind of sneak by you. There's a lot of fascination to me in this, but really and truly, there's a statement that Peter makes before the Sanhedrin after the resurrection, after the ascension of Jesus, when he's pulled in to be questioned. And one of the things that he said to them was, "You killed the author of life." And to be seated in judgment, to be seated in a judgment chair and have someone say that to you, and the gravity of that passage, that phrase from Peter, from that after this, like, they really did. they really did kill Jesus. They really did crucify him and took his, and took it to that point. And so, and you realize, we look at it from 30,000 feet and realize it had to happen. And Jesus understood that. We kind of left them at the arrest and the betrayal last week. And you realize that the struggle, we didn't really cover the struggle in the Garden of Gethsemane in this series, but his struggle was not, his struggle was with the will of God. That this was the will of God, this was the way it was going to happen. Understanding that God can use anything. He uses anything. And so in this situation, he used the will of sinful men and their greed to bring about the crucifixion, which brought about the substitutionary death that could happen for our sins. And it's just fascinating to me. It boggles my mind. I can't get my head around it. But to look at what they did to get to this point, that's what we're going to look at today. And so if you're a legal person, or if you're like a person that likes to watch court TV, then this may really appeal to you a lot. If not, there's a lot of really neat things here. And at the end, what do we get from this? What do we take from this? How do we respond? And so keep that in your mind as we go. The first thing that we want to note here is that today we're going to look at the Jewish trials, okay? These are the trials that Jesus endured from his own people, okay? This is what he endured from his own people. And the first statement that I want to share with you in that regard is that they were illegal. These were illegal trials, and they did not follow their own rules. They broke one right after another. And so in order to start this morning, instead of sharing with you from the passage of the first trial to begin with, I want to read to you some rules from the Mishnah. Okay, and so let me explain to you what the Mishnah is. The Mishnah is the written oral tradition. You're like, well, that's a contrast of terms. And so, yes, it is. And so what happened is that we've talked a lot about the Pharisees. We talk a lot about the Sadducees. The Pharisees being the keeper of the rules, the keeper of the law. You have the Pentateuch, right, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Those are considered the law books. And so they use that as their background. That's what they use as their basis. But when they didn't get all that they wanted, they would extrapolate that, add to, and increase, okay, and add more to it. And that's why Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount the way that he did. When he said phrases like, "You've heard that it was said long ago. You have heard that it was written long ago, but I tell you." Okay? What he was saying is that I wrote it then, and I'm here now. Same finger. Okay? And so I'm explaining to you what I meant then and what I meant, because in the middle of that, you have all of these things. Now, not all of those things are completely useless. Okay? Some of these things were just like, okay, how do we... And here's the thing. You guys, some of you all have been here for a long time. You know, when I say policies and procedure, you're like, oh, you've sat through hours of meetings. to say how do we function? How do we govern ourselves? How do we answer questions? When a question arises in a meeting or a question arises within a group, what do we go by? Okay, what do we go by? How do we say, well, if that's a question, what are we going to follow? Okay, what are we going to follow? Well, Jesus would kind of come to say, follow me, okay, and follow my example. It's really hard to write a set of rules that are exactly perfect, but we can follow his guide. And so what I'm going to share with you here is a real detour in their own rules that they took to arrive at the place that they eventually got to. All right? So here's 18 of them. You say, oh my gosh, we're going to be here. We're not, I promise you. Okay? Really quickly. Here's 18 specific laws that govern cases like that of Jesus. This is memorized in every one of them. There's not a high priest, there's not a Sanhedrin member, there's not a Pharisee that did not know every one of these, just like that, okay? We get it now from the Mishnah, which was written down, but these guys had it right here. This was everything about them, and that's what they do, and so they would have known this inside and out. Number 1, no trials were to occur during the night hours before the morning sacrifice. Okay? Remember that. Trials were not to occur on the eve of the Sabbath or during any festival. Remember that. All trials were to be held in the hall of judgment in the temple area for all to see, always. Capital cases. We're deciding the life of someone. Okay? We're deciding the life of someone. This decision is to put someone to death. I was flipping through the channels the other night. Back when I was a senior in high school, Miss Ford was our psychology teacher, and she introduced us to a movie called 12 Angry Men. Okay, starred Henry Fonda. If you've never seen it, if you catch it on Classic sometime, watch that. All right? Just watch that, and it's fascinating. Okay, it's fascinating. When people get together to decide the fate of someone by taking or allowing their life, it's a big deal, okay? It's a big deal. So Jesus' capital case, that's what they wanted to kill him, okay? So it's a capital case. It required a minimum of 23 judges, according to the Mishnah. An accused person could not testify against himself. Someone was required to speak on behalf of the accused. Someone had to speak on behalf of the accused. Conviction, if you're going to carry through with this, it required the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses to be in perfect alignment. That comes straight out of Deuteronomy. Okay? Straight out of Deuteronomy. Witnesses for the prosecution are to be examined and cross-examined extensively. And you say, why? Because we're dealing with someone's life. Not just Jesus, anyone. If we're going to take a life, it's got to be cross-examined and follow all of these guidelines. Capital cases were to follow a strict order. It begins with arguments by the defense and then arguments for conviction. All Sanhedrin judges could argue for acquittal, but they could not all argue for conviction. It was against their law. Here's a good one. Remember this one. The high priest could not, should not participate in the questioning. The high priest should not participate in the questioning. Each witness in a capital case was to be examined individually and not in the presence of other witnesses. This is how they conducted capital cases. The testimony of 2 witnesses found to be in contradiction rendered both of them invalid. They were both to be tossed. Voting for conviction and sentencing in a capital case was to be conducted individually, beginning with the youngest, so that younger members would not be influenced by the voting of elder members. Individually, each member. Verdicts in capital cases were to be handed down only during daylight hours. Sentencing in a capital case was not to occur until the next day. You had to wait a day before you sentenced someone who was convicted. Now, there are 18 rules. And if you're a Christ follower and you've been around for a while, you can already see how twisted and bent and crazy this is about to be. Let's look at it. John chapter 18, verse 12. We're in the Garden of Gethsemane. The arrest has been made. Where do we go first? Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and they brought him first. Where? To Annas. To Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. He had been the high priest, but he wasn't now. He was not. This was not the Sanhedrin. This was not anybody who was currently in authority, but it was Annas. Why Annas? Why now? Why in the middle of the night? Why not just take him into custody and wait till the morning, right? Every rule very clear. None of this is to be done at night. None of it. All of it has to be done in the daylight. But they go straight to Annas. They go straight to Annas. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter, and let me just take a quick note. Some of you guys discuss these things in your small groups and things, and that's awesome. This story that I'm sharing with you this morning, it coincides with Peter's denial, and so that's a whole other thing. And if I spend the time to highlight that, we will be here until the storms hit this afternoon, and so we're just gonna set that one over here. So I'm not ignoring it; it's there. Feel free to discuss it. One day we'll come back to that. So that's happening. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus, because this disciple was known to the high priest. This is an interesting line right there, that John was known. And so he was able to get in. All right, they knew who he was. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of the man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and the officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. And this is Jesus. Think about those rules that I just read, and notice the conversation here. I've spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. Remember the rules that we just read? Jesus' response: "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Why Annas? Why first to Annas? Folks, this is like a visit to the Godfather. They were all part of the Annas crime family. All right? They were crooked as it gets. They were as crooked as it gets. And this was just one of those power statements that Annas had told them: when you arrest him and you get him, you bring him here. You bring him here. Basically, I just want to look at him and let him know that we're going to kill him, that it's coming. That's what this was. This was like this was it. This was cruel, evil. And the thing that to begin understanding the restraint that Jesus had to have, not to say or do or act. Can you imagine the power that he has with a thought that he could do to anyone at any time, at any place? He could level this guy's courtyard, that he could just have leveled the whole place and stood there in triumphant victory. But that's not what it was about. That was the struggle in the garden. That's not what this was about. This was about setting us free. And so he had to do what he had to do. So they leave Annas. That's the first trial. Okay? That's the first questioning. Every rule that you can imagine, broken. At night, an individual, a high priest, not even the real one that's actually in authority, questioned by him. We pick it up with Mark chapter 14 and verse 53. They took Jesus to the high priest and all the chief priests. The elders and the teachers of the law came together. Okay? This is the Sanhedrin. This is the ruling government of Israel. This is who they are. They're all coming together. And again, it's night. It's in the dark. It's illegal. Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. What? They already had a verdict in mind? But all of the judges can't they already had it pre-planned. This is wrong. They were looking for evidence against Jesus. No one came. Remember that you have to have reason. You have to have evidence. There's no evidence. It says very clearly they couldn't find any. They were looking for evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Verse 56, many testified falsely against him. What does testimonies have to be? Corroborate. They have to be exactly in alignment. They didn't. Their statements did not agree. You see the violation of the Mishnah? It's right there. Their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. Well, we heard him say, I'll destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days we'll build another not made with hands. Yet even their testimonies did not agree. And then the high priest, who's not supposed to question, stood up and asked Jesus a question illegally. Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? Verse 62. I am. Wow. Wow. When Moses asked the burning bush, who do I tell these people in Egypt that you are? You tell them, I am that sent you. It's the same one, folks. It's the same one. I am. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? Maybe it's because it's your rules. You've heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. What about the waiting? What about taking a day? What about discussing the case all night? What about all of the rules of the Mishnah? They all condemned him as worthy of death, and then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him. They struck him with their fist, and they said, prophesy, and the guards took him and beat him. Now, it's a little difficult as you track through the Gospels to keep this all straight. But the next thing that we see happens very quickly, and it's the third trial among the Jewish people. Because there's three. There's Annas, and then there's the one that we just highlighted, which both took place at night. But then there's the third. And it happens very quickly, and it's most clearly found in Luke. So in Luke chapter 22, verse 66, we see an attempt to make it more legal. Okay? There's an attempt here to make it more with impropriety of their rules. In verse 66 it says, "At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and the teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them." Okay? So they reconvened. They reconvened after daylight. And so they brought Jesus in very early, right after sunrise, very early in the morning. They bring him back in. And then they say, "If you are the Messiah, tell us." And Jesus answered, "Well, if I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I ask you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God." They all ask, "Are you then the Son of God?" And he replied, "You say that I am." Then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." 3 illegal trials, breaking every rule that I read to you. And now they're ready to turn him over to the Roman government to be crucified. We'll look at those trials next week. But what do you take from this? What do we take from this? What do we get from this? I mean, it's so sad. It's so sad, and it's frightening. But here's the hard truth. Sometimes we have to stop trying to be heard and stop hoping for vindication. We just have to simply speak the truth in love without apology. We live in a very sheltered area, okay? We live in the buckle of the Bible Belt, okay? We really do. We live in a state where our schools now have "In God We Trust" written on the buildings as you walk through the door, okay? We live in a very sheltered place when it comes to persecution. We have freedom. We have more freedom than we use, okay? We take it for granted. We truly have more freedom to share the gospel openly with people than we use. And we should be ashamed of that, because you get conditioned sometimes, and when you've been conditioned, then we've gone through court cases and we've gone through battles, right? I mean, I remember being a student at Ohio County High School in the 1980s. I mean, come on. When Doug King came to be the youth pastor at Beaver Dam Baptist and wanted to have a youth rally and wanted to announce it at the high school, he was told no. The Beaver Dam Baptist youth kids wore T-shirts that said, "Ask someone who knows." They walked the hallways of Ohio County High School in 1987, and the shirt said, "Ask someone who knows." And then the youth leaders had shirts on that said, "I know." We were undercover in our own school inviting people, okay? By the time I was back teaching, we were handing out riot T-shirts in the lobby, okay? And advertising it on any locker that we wanted to hang it up on the walls of the school and inviting the kids to come. Okay, we don't take the freedom sometimes that we have, but here Jesus is in a moment of persecution, and here's the thing. He wasn't hoping for vindication. In this situation, he was not expecting somebody to come forward and go, this man's being falsely accused, we need to vote the other way, we need to change our votes. That's not what was about to happen. When we speak the truth in love without apology to whoever will listen to us, we should expect to suffer for doing so. There are so many places in the world that they are held by their governments. There was a terrible earthquake this week in the country of Myanmar. If you were on social media like I was, you saw the pictures from Bangkok. That's not where the center of the earthquake was, okay? It was tragic in Bangkok. We saw pictures of buildings shaking. We saw skyscrapers falling to the ground that were under construction. We saw pools overflowing off the top of skyscrapers. But Myanmar is where it happened. You didn't see any pictures from Myanmar. Why? Because the government has their thumb on them. Word that I'm getting this morning is over 10,000 people were killed in that earthquake. There are places in the world that are so restricted. So restricted that you can't even get in there to share the gospel. And if you do, you can expect to be persecuted heavily and even killed. Jesus had come to a place where he had accepted that he would not receive justice from men. That was not my will, but yours. They are going to kill me. It is going to hurt. It is going to be rough. Okay? It is going to be brutal. But not my will, but yours. He instead submitted himself to the will of the Father. He spoke the truth. And here's the amazing thing. And this is a lesson for us, and it's hard. It's not easy. He refused to allow anger or bitterness to distract anyone who was around from seeing it. You see, because 2,000 years later, what Peter witnessed in this moment, Mark wrote down. 2,000 years later, what John witnessed, he wrote it down. And we have it. We have eyewitness accounts of what took place. And we read it today and we go, how could he do that? How could he stand there? How could he take that? Knowing the power that he had. I'm sure as John went in the back, he's like, I've seen this guy control the weather. I've seen him walk on water. There's no telling what's getting ready to happen in here. We don't know what's coming. I know what he can do. I've seen it. Whew. But he just took it. He took it and he walked out. And John wrote it down. And we have it. He instead submitted himself to the will of the Father. Throughout this entire ordeal, he entrusted himself to the one who will ultimately and inevitably judge every soul righteously. And the only thing that we can do is the same. And that's our walking point. And folks, in order to be able to do that, the relationship must be strong. And my prayer this morning is that if you are not strong as you want to be, or you are not there at all, take this opportunity and make it happen. Let me pray for you. Father, we love you. We thank you.